What's your most unpopular opinion?
It's that debugging with a debugger is much slower than just printing out values and thinking. Like, I find
This must be a Go developer thing, because it's definitely not unpopular with me. But like, I know, for example, if we also invited John Carmack up here, that he'd have a few things to say about
yeah,
that.
I'm sure. And honestly, it probably depends. Most of the unpopular opinions, really, if we're honest, it's like, it depends.
Mat Ryer, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really, really excited about this episode.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lane. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so I started digging into your past. I mean, I'd heard about you, years ago, but I really started digging in just in this last week when you'd agreed to come on the pod, and I found out that like a lot of the things you've worked on are kind of just name brand things in the Go ecosystem, and I've used like all of them. You work at Grafana. Obviously, you did work on the Testify package. So super, super excited. Do you want to take just a second and kind of introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Mat Ryer. I've been a programmer for a long time now. I like doing music. I usually do stupid music, which is its own genre of like comedy music, I suppose. I could prefer stupid pop.
Like Flight of the Conchords music?
It's kind of like that. I do love the Flight of the Conchords.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like, and I do like, yeah. And like you say, lots of things in Go. I've been around in Go since before it was V1. So that's why some of the things that I worked on are sort of like, they grew up with Go. So
Yeah.
just really lucky to be doing that, really.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So I want to kind of step through. I mean, we'll go all the way back to the beginning and then kind of step through your career in the first half of this episode. Let's start with just like, how did you get into coding? When did you write like your first line of code?
So first of all, I should say I'm not very. I don't think anyone's interested in me ever. So this is quite awkward to be just talking about myself. But luckily, you did say I'm allowed to swear, so that'll help.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually, I started because my dad was interested in computers when I was a kid, and we would have like early computers like an Amiga, and actually before that a Spectrum, which I actually have on my wall behind me, a photo of the Spectrum computer. So when I was about 6 years old, he would read out code from magazines, and I would type it in, and we'd build like you'd get like a magazine. There wasn't floppy disks even, I think, or maybe they were, but I don't actually think
the
they were.
90s? When is this?
Yeah, this is early 90s. Early 90s, and they just print the code in a magazine, so it'd just be like all the code there you have to copy manually, which kind of can't imagine doing that now, but it was great. Once it took a lot of work to get it working. And then once it was working, you could then play around with it and change things and see what happened. And that to me as a kid was just like, this is like unbelievable. And I never really lost that spirit or that feeling when I'm building something and it starts to come together and starts to work. I never lost that feeling of that excitement. So I'm very lucky that I was able to turn it into a career and make money from doing the thing that I love doing.
Yeah, that's bizarre. So I definitely came along a little bit later. The idea of reading code in a magazine is very foreign to me. What magazine like dumps source code and publishes it to the world? I'm guessing it's got to be a coding magazine, right?
Yeah, it was. It was like those early. I remember there was an Amiga Format was a magazine I used to have as a kid, but these must have been before that because it was the Spectrum. So I've no idea. Probably a future publishing publication. But we just didn't, at that point, didn't have the internet, and we didn't have even the medium. Like it was a cassette. You'd buy games on a cassette, like an audio. Then people don't even know what that is. So I mean, I'm not explaining this crazy concept, but yeah. So it's like cassette, old cassettes would have the data on there, a bit like how a modem works, turns into audio, and then they can turn it back into the data after. So you'd have to press play, and then the computer would be listening, and then it'd be like
I remember that
the
sound. Yeah.
And so it's just like phenomenal. But even that, actually, I'm really nostalgic for when tech was just really rubbish. Like, it's all very slick and works now.
Yeah,
which is
back
less
when you
fun.
had to be really weird to even like it, right? Or
Yeah,
to even be
exactly.
into it at all.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. I definitely remember those days. So
Yeah.
okay, so you kind of got in, it sounds like, as like a hobbyist as a kid. When did you, like, I'm doing air quotes, like, properly, when did you, like, properly learn to code, like, such that you could eventually have a career in it?
Yeah, I don't know, because I went from doing that as a kid and just building. I'd make little games for my brothers. I remember making traffic lights once that was just like on a timer. We just changed the color of the screen to traffic lights, and then they would pretend to be cars going around, and then there'd be a red light, and one of them would be a policeman, and if you go through the red light, he'd come and get you. So it's like that, things like that, games, and was just doing things like that, and then through school, through like high school or like secondary school, we call it. Just always was doing various coding. I remember getting into the web technologies, and I remember learning HTML and starting to build websites and stuff. And it was all just hobby. And then when I was 16, I left school. No, I think I was 17, something like that. I left school quite early and got a job just as a web developer. And I sort of
Like, dropped out or like graduated early?
I think I kind of finished we have this thing. It's complicated because you don't have the same schooling system all over the place. But there's like an optional 2 years after mandatory school.
Okay.
So I did all the mandatory school, right? It's called mandatory for a reason, Lane. You have to do it.
Okay.
Then you had 2 years of optional. You could either go on to college or university. But my schooling, like IT as a discipline, like wasn't a thing then. I think I was the first year I was in the first year group that had IT as an actual exam, and the lessons were just like doing stuff in Excel and Word. We weren't really doing anything very interesting. So I kind of came away with this idea that they couldn't teach me anything. These people, they didn't know. I knew more than them, honestly.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'd be teaching other people, or like writing programs for the school and things like this.
So this wasn't like a CS program. This was like just the beginnings of an IT department in a school.
Yeah, in like a high school.
Yeah.
Thing. Yeah, and so I unfortunately left. There was one crazy thing that happened when I was even younger, and I was in like the nursery school or the earlier junior school, where they had this one computer in the school and it just crashed or something. And for some reason, like, somebody knew that I liked computers, and the teacher came and got me. So I remember being in class and being scared because, like, I was like pulled out of class. I just assumed I was going to be in trouble or something. And then I went over, and I had no idea. It was just a kind of computer I'd never seen before. And it was just, the screen just looked balked in some way. But it had a break key on it. And the break key used to break basic programs. And that was the same on the Spectrum or the Amiga. So I pressed the break, and then it gives you a little command prompt. And I typed list, because I was like, is this the same as what I have? And I typed list, which prints out the code of the loaded program. And all the source code just went across the screen like the Matrix. And then I just typed run, essentially restarted it, and it worked. But think of that from the teacher's perspective. Like, I just come along and
I'm like a wizard.
Yeah, it must have looked amazing. Yeah, but so I don't know. I think that mixed with like the fact that the IT teachers, they weren't IT teachers even. There's no such thing as that. They were like a geography teacher who happened to have an interest in computing, and that was how it was. It wasn't taken very seriously yet. So I didn't go to university. I just thought that's not how you learn things. You learn things by building it and doing it. And so it was that, and I went straight into work from there.
That's amazing. That resonates with me really well. To all my listeners, I'm sure for obvious reasons.
Resumates actually works there. If you think about, you're talking about your career, like a resume.
Yeah.
And it resonates. I think you've actually come up with a new word that I'd be pretty
Resumes.
happy with that. Yeah, that
That's pretty
resumes.
good.
Yeah,
Some
you did
alliteration. Yeah.
it's good work.
Thank you. Okay, so you did not go to university. You jumped straight into a career in, you said, web development right after kind of secondary or high school.
Yeah.
Cool. And from there, where did you go? I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you didn't start your career in Go. What kind of technologies were you using at the start?
Yeah, originally I was using ASP, so it's Microsoft Technologies, Active Server Pages. This was before .NET. It eventually became ASP.NET, but this is before that. And it was essentially VB Script. VB Script on Pages, a bit like how PHP is, honestly. Like, and it, yeah, it was just like, honestly, like you could still, even with that technology, you could still build more or less all the things we still build. They just weren't quite as good. And probably at scale, they'd be a bit of a nightmare to maintain, I imagine. But that's what I was doing, building websites. And we'd have like real clients and customers and stuff that needed a website. The web was quite new and everyone had this idea they needed to be on the web. So yeah, there was plenty of stuff to do. And it was quite a challenge, really. Like, there wasn't you could just do anything because nobody knew anything.
Yeah,
there were no standards. No one expected anything, and this was the web when a GIF would be like phenomenal. It'd take ages to load. Like, images used to take ages to load. Like, you'd be waiting for, and it'd sometimes start low res.
I remember that. It's like coming down the screen,
or load from the top to the bottom. Yeah, so it's like crazy.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question. I've had this stereotype in my head, and I don't know if it's accurate. Maybe you'll be able to shed some light on it.
Is it about British people and their teeth?
No, not that one. We can address that later.
Sure.
Do you want to share about British people and their teeth?
Mine are all right.
Yeah, you have great teeth. Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah.
You didn't like my tweet about hair, though. I noticed.
Oh, didn't I? You mean I didn't like it as in I didn't click like on it? I probably liked it.
No, I don't know if you liked it or not, but you responded to it with, "Oh, for fuck's sake!"
Oh yeah,
and I wasn't quite sure what to take away from that.
This was the tweet where you said, somebody said like, "I learned JavaScript and lost all my hair," and then you said, "Learn Go and you will have amazing hair," and then you do have amazing hair. It's annoying.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, and I was just like, great, I learned Go.
Didn't work out the way you'd like.
It didn't quite work out, but you know what I lack in hair, I more than make up for in forehead. So
and personality and accent. You can get a long way with personality and accent. So.
Accent goes a long way, yeah. That's for sure.
You've got like a Johnny Depp from Pirates, like kind of just a little bit of that in there.
I don't know what you're talking about, it's all mate. I'm nothing like him, Savvy. I learned JavaScript, mate. I lost all my hair.
Have you dressed up as Jack Sparrow for Halloween? Have you done that? Do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, you can't do that voice and then not go full dep. Do you know what I mean? You're gonna go full dep at some point. I've also got the little beard that goes with that as well.
No, it wasn't like, I've only heard you on the podcast. I haven't really seen you in person talking before. But like, I already kind of had that, like, oh, he kind of sounds like Jack Sparrow just a little bit. And like now it's even more so with the visuals. So it adds a lot. Yeah. For all you listening to the pod, you'll need to go check the YouTube.
Well, just Google for Johnny Depp. That'll do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Google images.
Oh, no, I completely forgot where we were. So
I was talking about my hair. I was at a conference, and I talk about, like, I'm trying to be quite self-deprecating because I like being silly and funny. And it's in the Go community, like, we genuinely want to build a community that's inclusive and welcoming and like a safe space for everyone. So I can't just make fun of other people. So I've really only got myself that I can make fun of. So obviously then hairline. The hairline is something that I genuinely not that bothered about it, but it's quite a funny thing. It's just a sort of nice icebreaker. But what happens is now, because I've been doing it a lot, people now sort of have license to just insult me. Like they just at conferences, someone said, "Your hair doesn't look so bad from a distance." From a distance, like in low res, you're all right. You look all right. Do you know what I mean? I'd be gorgeous in Minecraft as a character.
You look good in 480. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awful.
from a distance. So I couldn't believe that really. And the other one I got in Berlin recently at GopherCon Europe was someone just said, "Is that a wig?" Like, imagine choosing that. Like, you go into a wig shop and you're like, "Have you got any wigs that are like you've glued a small piece of hair on a balloon and then blown the balloon up and the hair's stayed the same size? Have you got any of those wigs?" Because I'd look. Or just didn't have enough money. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have enough.
Man. What a struggle.
Yeah,
my struggle with my hair is I have probably the worst cowlick I've ever seen. So if I let it get out of control, I look like Alfalfa from the Little Rascals. So I have to keep an eye on that. But
right. Yeah,
other than that, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can only dream of having problems like that.
Okay, all right. I want to get us out of hair talk, as interesting as it is, and bring us back to programming. So you were doing web development. Oh yeah, the stereotype. That's how we got on this. The stereotype. Okay, here's my stereotype of kind of early 2000s, maybe even 90s programming. It's like it seems like a lot of developers back then were kind of employed in more of a freelance style or like an agency style where you're kind of building custom tools and websites for like traditionally non-tech companies. Whereas now it seems like there's like way more just like tech companies that are building like SaaS products and things like that. Is that an industry shift that's real, or am I just kind of making that up?
Yeah, that is definitely real. The first company I worked for was an ISP. So it wasn't just websites. They would also provide the internet for people, i.e. you would dial this company, your computer would dial it through the modem, and that's how you get on the internet. So they must have had some kind of ISDN line to some bigger provider, and then they were selling the last mile stuff to people. It was just grouped all up together. It was just computers, basically.
Yeah.
In fact, they did even support of like, we'd go around people's houses and help them get set up and things like this. And yeah, everything, it's just changed so much since that. Now we have big tech companies and companies building things for other tech companies and things like this.
Yeah. I mean, if you work at a tech company, your tech company probably uses like 10 or 15 other software as a service products, like as internal tools, right? Whereas before, maybe you would have hired in-house developers to like build off the shelf crazy stuff, is kind of the vibe that I definitely get. Again, I wasn't necessarily around. I was still kind of in high school at that time, but that's my basic understanding of it. Okay, so you're in web development. Where do you go from there? Like, take me very quickly up to the point where you first get involved with Go, because I know you were involved pretty early.
Yeah, I was working for a bank in London. I was consulting. So just to get to the London then, because I'm from a town near Nottingham in the UK, in England, a town called Mansfield, and near that a village called Mansfield Woodhouse. So we're talking like very small little rural village. Actually, when I go back, it's kind of, I realize now it's amazing. It's like in the countryside. It's like beautiful. Then it was just normal and it was rubbish, and I wanted to be somewhere different. Yeah. And so I moved. I was in a band. So there's a gap where I was, I could do some tech work, and then I'd be in a band, and I'd go and we did some tours, and we had a bit of success around the UK. And
well,
so
what's the band? What did you play?
Oh, we played. Tell us now. We played songs. Have you heard, songs? Everyone's doing that now, but back then it was a real novelty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were the first to disrupt the music industry with songs, and specifically, you played the.
I played the guitar in that band, and we got in with like a local radio station, and they would put on these events in like arenas. So we were the house band, and we got to play the arenas, and we toured and played like massive venues, and like we just did this crazy summer of going around, basically like acting like pop rock stars, imposters. We thought we were imposters because that's how it felt, and actually that's before I'd heard the term imposter syndrome. But it's very real. That was how it felt. We just like, we have no business being here, but we're just gonna go for it. But it was nice. I would always be doing the coding. Like the coding was the hobby as well. So like in any gaps, and it was also
Music
very
paid the bills and coding was the hobby. That's a hilarious reality.
yeah. Well, so I was living in this house. I was living in the house with my bandmate. It was his house, and at the time my girlfriend, and we were kind of like really poor. Like we just had like nothing. So we'd do like I'd do a job and say like I'd build someone a website for £1,000, which was I'd never had £1,000. So I was just like, and that would last ages. So we'd just live off just like, I didn't pay rent, just staying with my mate in this house, and but I've never really had enough money to get into the city, into Nottingham, to get like a proper job. Literally, that couldn't afford the bus fare for the first month to do it. But eventually, I must have done some contract or something to do that. But what happened was, it was the songwriting royalties that came from those gigs, because I was the songwriter. It was those royalties that came like a year after we'd done the gigs or something that really did lift us out of that and sort of unlocked things. It wasn't loads of cash. It certainly was at the time more than I'd ever like imagined. Because I just thought, I don't know. I just never paid any attention to it. So that was weird, but eventually ended up working in Nottingham, and then Laurie, my girlfriend, got a job at the Science Museum in London. And she said, she got an interview actually, and said, right, we might move to London. And this was like, whoa. So I had to I came down to London and like trying to look for some jobs or something. And then worked at BT, which is the British Telecom company.
Okay.
And they had like an open day where you would go and just pitch. They'd like say, imagine you can do these things. And they would just describe a modern smartphone. Like they knew that phones were happening. They'd say, imagine you knew where people were. They had a screen that you could communicate. Like, it was just this imaginary thing, but they were just describing a phone. And they were like, come up with some kind of app that would, just come up with an app, really. I just love stuff like that. So it went really well, this open day session, and then I got offered the job. And the salary was like, from where I'm from, was just unbelievable. This is like, I can't really, at the time, couldn't believe it. People didn't believe me. I remember my dad didn't believe me. I told him what the salary was. He just thought I was lying. And I don't have a reputation for lying or anything, but it just sounded too unbelievable.
That's crazy. Do you mind sharing with us how much that first salary was?
No, yeah, it was £40,000 a year.
Pounds a year.
Yeah, and it was just couldn't fathom that. Like, coming from basically nothing and not really having, and being also still quite young at this point, but just never having had, because I was sort of on and off doing projects here and there, never really had proper kind of income like that. It was mainly on minimum wage before and things.
Yeah. So, I definitely know the feeling. Like I worked at a restaurant kind of before and in college. And then I worked at a bank as a teller, which is like kind of just barely above minimum wage. And then, like got my first salaried job working at a tech company. It was like, holy cow. Like, like I could actually pay my rent and have some extra money. Like that's kind of crazy. Yeah. Different world for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I think we sometimes we have to remember that, we're doing quite well if you've got a job in tech generally compared to average. We are doing quite well.
It's I think it's important to remember where average actually is.
Well, it's shocking. I don't know how people survive on it, honestly.
Yeah, well, I think the answer is barely for the most part, which is which really sucks. Yeah. I mean, I'm hopeful, obviously, that the things get better and that people are able to upskill and learn more, and that we'll get to a better level of efficiency in society in general. But it's definitely not ever been ideal throughout all of human history, right?
Yeah. No, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So then let's fast forward to yeah, when did you start, when did you first get introduced to the Go programming language?
Yes. So I had this idea for a project which was called Stretcher, and the idea was it was just like an API that would just accept anything, any data, and you could just put data in and just get data out. It's a bit essentially MongoDB. In fact, it was backed, I think, by MongoDB, or it was eventually backed by MongoDB. That was just the back end of it. But so there's this idea that you could just push, like I was building front ends and back ends, but I would always have to, basically I was just repeating the back end work all the time, building the same
Mm-hmm.
thing with slightly different schemas and stuff. And I thought I could probably abstract this, and then I could just build my projects more quickly.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to put it in Google App Engine because I also liked the idea of not having to manage the servers. And it's quite the early days for App Engine. You could only choose Python, Java, or this new experimental language, Go, that was pre V1 at this point. But there was
Oh wow.
enough. Yeah, it was enough. It did enough things that did all the things I needed it to do for building this project. So, and it's something about that experimental badge, the little EXP, that was just like, I still can't resist that. It's just that's same spirit of being in school and of copying the programs out and then changing things, like experimenting and playing around.
So it
Uh,
wasn't even that you were trying to avoid like Python or Java or whatever other languages are supported.
no, I didn't know them, so I had to learn
Hmm.
something to do this. So, and honestly, I did look at. I used to do C sharp. I used to do a lot of C sharp. C sharp, I think. Well, certainly then, a great language. I think even now is still good. I don't know it. I know that they've added lots and lots of features to it, which I sort of now don't like. Because of Go. Go really taught
Yeah.
me the real value of actually just not having all those features and just having some bare bones tools to work with. Um, so yeah, I didn't want to learn Java, and and same for Python. I just didn't. There's just no. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why I chose it. It was just, I think, probably was the experimental badge, and the fact that I had to learn something. If I already knew Java, I would have definitely just done it in Java. If I already knew Python, I would have definitely used that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. So you're living on the bleeding edge. You're choosing this experimental V0 language, and you're building. So like now everything's starting to make sense. The stretcher namespace for the Testify package that I use, that's where this is coming from,
Yeah,
right? So you go ahead and you start building the stretcher product or the stretcher code base.
yeah. We build it. It works, and it's actually like shockingly fast because it was just written in Go compared to other languages that and other programs I'd built before. It was phenomenally fast, and I hadn't optimized it at all. It was just fast. So yeah, I think, I don't know, at that point I was just sort of like all in on this. Like, I just thought this is great, and I just hoped that Google would get to a V1 or something. But I sort of didn't even care about that because I was still um, able to solve the problems I needed to solve and build the thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was like I was perfectly happy with that.
Yeah. That's impressive. That's early. So is this like 2012? Like what's
Yeah,
the time frame here?
yeah, 2012, around then, definitely. Because the first GopherCon was 2014 in Denver,
Okay.
Colorado, where I was living. I lived in Colorado actually just by pure coincidence. I was living in Denver, and the Go conference was on the same street that I was living on down in downtown Denver. Um, so I just walked to the conference, and that was able to get. That's how I was at the first ever GopherCon. Which was
That's amazing.
it was an amazing experience as well. We'd built Testify by this point, so we had the testing, and it was popular. It got used because, frankly, um, there were just no other options for people.
Yeah.
So and Testify then was a lot smaller, and it just had some of the core basic things. But everyone was using it, and so when we'd walking around this conference, they're like, "Oh, Stretcher!" Like, "Oh yeah, we use Testify," and sort of started meeting all these people, just through that. And it's like that was my first proper conference experience, where that was happening, and that was very nice. That was like really a positive experience. The organizers of the conference, Eric St. Martin, Brian Kettleson, Kelsey Hightower was hosting it that year. They kept on at making a point about being different to other tech communities, being inclusive, making sure people felt welcome, like all these things which I thought were very important, and I did see were missing in other communities. And I must say, like, credit them for that. Like, that was the thing that I think made me think I'm going to stick around here, because they don't need to be saying this stuff at all. The talks were great. The conference itself was great. They didn't need to be saying these things, but they chose to, and they made a thing of it. And I just really I think I just really respected that they did that. It wasn't easy then to do this as well, by the way. Like, even in 2014, it's like you'd get a lot of eye rolls if you start saying, "Oh, we need to be inclusive" and stuff. It just sounded like, oh, it's all this woolly nonsense stuff. So it wasn't an easy thing, I don't think, for them to just be saying, but there they were on stage, and it was a big part of the community. Bill Kennedy, I think, spoke also at that conference that's when I first probably met Bill.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I just had Bill on a couple episodes ago, and he was talking about his switch kind of from the .NET world over to Go.
Yeah.
You guys were both there like early days. I first started learning Go in 2015.
Right. That's very early still.
It was early. I was really lucky. I have, and actually my professor just agreed to come on to the podcast a few episodes from now. But I had a professor in college down at Dixie State University, Southern Utah, that was really into Go for whatever reason, like back in 2013, 2014, 2015. He wrote the Black Friday Markdown parser. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes.
It's what Hugo
I used
for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I just kind of got lucky and like had this professor that was really into Go, which I thought was pretty cool.
That is cool. That's unusual as well for professors. Like, right? Normally I don't know, they seem to lag because
they get outdated, right?
Yeah. I don't know why. Well, it makes sense. I don't think it's as
I think you out of the industry for too long sometimes, right?
Yeah, or you just got this is the curriculum, and changing the curriculum was difficult. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah, that's great that they were interested in that.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I worked with the person that did the Blue Monday package.
Blue Monday.
Yeah,
that's funny. I don't know if I've heard of that one.
Is it Blue Monday?
I'm guessing it's a riff on Black Friday.
It is. I'm just checking it because it may be an edit point if I got it wrong. That's the cool thing about podcasts.
Yeah. Is it the Microcosm Blue Monday?
Yes. And that's a sort of
okay.
Yeah, it's just because you mentioned Black Friday.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, very cool.
Good link.
Yeah, I'll drop that in the show notes. I'm a big fan of Hugo. I use Hugo for all my blogs, and it's really cool, really fast parsers that have been written in Go.
Yeah, Steve Francia, SPF 13, is also another one of those great kind of community people that I think spoke at the first GopherCon. Was working at MongoDB at the time, and that's where I met him as well. So it's like I didn't know who he was then, and I actually forgot about him as well. And it was only much later when I realized I'd already met him. Like, I kind of got friendly with him, and then just one night I remember thinking, like, "Oh, I think I've already met you before." Strange feeling.
It's crazy how small the tech world is when you start doing any sort of in-person stuff.
Yeah.
If you ever, and this is really for anyone in the audience, if you ever have the ability to get to some of these in-person meetups or events, it's pretty amazing who you can meet at some of these things. Like even just like 10-person meetups in your local city, like oftentimes the 10 people that show up to that meetups, like 5 of them will be extremely impressive engineers, and you get to just kind of hang out with them for an hour and talk and chat.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of anything you can do in person. Could be such a boon to your career.
Yeah, I mean that is so true. It's almost worth reiterating. I mean, I remember one of the GopherCon UK conferences is where I met David Hernandez, and it was just like I was introduced by somebody. They were just like, "Oh, you should meet him, it's David." We later went on to found Machinebox together. We worked together for a bit, and we founded Machinebox, which we then sold. And it all started from just a chance meeting at an in-person conference.
That's so cool. Yeah. Amazing advice. Okay, so to rewind a little bit, you did Stretcher, and obviously you like this Testify package was one of the kind of open source projects, I'm guessing, that kind of spun off of that product. What was the end of that story with Stretcher? Did you end up selling that company or just moving on? How did that work?
Yeah, no, it didn't. It didn't, and it didn't sort of go anywhere. So this was Pars.com, which was essentially the same idea, was bought by Facebook for $85 million.
How did you pronounce that? Pause?
Parse, Parse.com.
Oh, Parse. Okay, got
Parse.
it.
Sorry, that's my accent. That's the downside to the accent.
Parse.com. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Parse.
So that one you did directly after Stretcher, or was there a time gap?
Sorry, no, I didn't build Parse.com.
It was a similar project.
Yeah. Yes,
Got
but
it.
it was like
Okay.
that was the successful one. That was the one that made it. So
Winner take all situation.
Yeah, it was kind of like, what's the point? This is that's that, and some internal stuff happened as well with the teams and the people. Kind of complicated.
Got it.
So yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. But the Testify, the project, just kind of survived it.
Lives on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you kind of spun down Stretcher, obviously the open source project went on to be used by many companies that I have worked at over the years. What did you do next?
I think I moved back to London. There was a company. So a company I was working for in Colorado was bought by Oracle, and there was for some reason, there was some legal thing going on between Stretcher and this company, and Oracle essentially like, if he's involved in this company and there's some legal thing going on, so he can't come along as part of the acquisition of this company into Oracle. Which I didn't lose anything. I didn't have any stock or anything in this company, so it was kind of no big deal. And I also wanted to come back to London anyway. I was trying to kind of find a route back, so it's sort of like perfect.
That's good.
Yeah. Alignment. And yeah, I helped found a company called Grey Matter, which is in the media and entertainment space. It's about extracting metadata from media assets and things.
Grey Matter?
Grey Matter, like.
Oh, Grey Meta. Okay, metadata. I was like, isn't that the like Breaking Bad, like the name of the company?
Yes,
in Breaking Bad?
It was a hat tilt to that. It was also about grey matter in your brain, but it was a metadata extraction company. So Grey Matter. So honestly, it's the best thing I've ever done in my career is come up with a name for that. I think
this episode is full of pop culture references. I hope everyone gets them.
Yeah, hope so. If not, Google it.
So Grey Meta, sorry, you said, well, continue.
Yeah, so I was working then for this company helping get it off the ground, but I was in London as a contractor, and we were using a lot of AI services from Google and Azure, and it was very expensive. And so essentially, like, if you imagine breaking a video into loads of frames and processing each frame to figure out what's going on, that's what essentially it was doing. That gets very expensive at scale. And it was David Hernandez who was working with us at the time. He said we could do some of the AI ourselves, And the company were just not interested in doing that at the time. So they said, well, we don't think we should do that. We're going to aggregate. We're going to just use other services. We're not going to get into the game of doing AI. So David left and started hacking. He left just, it kind of came naturally to the end of his time there, really. And he started hacking on some AI projects. One of the problems we had at Grey Meta was we couldn't easily run things at scale. And so he was like, we could do some AI, put it inside Docker containers, and then it can, we can run it horizontal scale, like just some, he had a lot of experience with high scalability projects because he'd worked at the BBC when the Olympics was happening in London in 2012, and he worked on like some real-time systems of the telemetry from the actual sports of like literally.
Wow.
Yeah. So, in massive kind of project. So he had a lot of experience of building for scale, and sort of instinctively just thought, I could probably do this. And then I remember going around and he'd implemented this face detector. And one of the innovations was you could just teach it with a single example. This was unlike what Google and Amazon at the time and Azure had, Microsoft, because you need lots of data in order to train the model. So great, like innovation, really, and essentially it's transfer learning. But basically, imagine like you have the AI, you do train a model on loads of faces, and then you peel away the last layer. You peel away the last layer. So what you end up with is a vector that comes out rather than the answer. So it won't tell you like this is this particular person. It'll say, here's a vector that describes the face. And then we use a multi-dimensional database to put those faces into this multi-dimensional space. And then you can use that for grouping and things. And also you can forget easily. You just delete it from this index, which you couldn't do as well very easily in these other cloud platforms at the time. You had to just retrain the whole thing again without the faces you didn't want in there. So that was Machinebox. And I was like, we should just like build this into a company. And he was like, no, I don't think so. He was a bit excited about it, but a lot of the time he was thinking, it's like, oh, it didn't take me long. It's like, he didn't see the value in it. I was like,
it's like the perfect programmer fallacy, right? Like
exactly.
Thinking that the more time you put into something, surely the more valuable it is on the market.
Right. Yeah. And I said, well, let me package this up. Like, let's build a developer experience here. Because it's like needed a user experience that would not only teach people about, because it's just an API, but there's a lot you can do with doing like building an experience for people, taking them on a journey, all the great things that I've learned over the years around like when someone invests a bit in something, give them a payback, give them something for it. Little things like that. And so it was all those kind of UI patterns. I was very interested in user experience and that of the product. And honestly, you can still try it now. If you go to machinebox.com, Veritone, which is the company that bought it, you need to create a Veritone account, but then you can experience the Machinebox developer experience. And I still think we nailed it. Like we put a lot of work into that side of it. And I do think we nailed it from a user experience, developer experience point of view. So it's just,
and for anyone listening, I think it's machinebox.io.
Thank you. I got it wrong, did I?
Looks pretty cool. And
you get to see some of Ashley McNamara's work as well, because we have this pink robot that was the mascot for machinebox.io. And it's Machina, the pink robot, which you can double click, and she sort of does a little jig.
Oh wow! I recognize some names here. You've got Dave Cheney on here with a testimonial.
Yeah. One of the things about being around in Go, just from being just early, and going to conferences and doing talks and things, was like you say, you just meet kind of, people that have done these amazing projects. And you just become friends with them, which is really cool.
So you spun Machinebox out clearly as its own product eventually, and it looks like that was just kind of a successful product that you ended up eventually selling to Veritone.
Yeah, yeah. It didn't take us long because this fit exactly. Like, Veritone were doing similar things to Grey Meta, and they had the same problem. It was very expensive, um, and to run all the AI, and so they wanted to have their own AI that they run, and they do. They're like massive. It's a public company, in fact. They do loads of um, AI, like ops. Really, it's like an operating system for AI that they have. Is how they call it. But essentially, yeah, it's all the services that you need run at scale, like all that kind of thing. But that was the one that was I guess that was the life changing one. That was like the big one where you sort of dream of one day I'm going to build something, and
That was your first huge win.
this was it. Yeah. Yes. This was like yeah, which was a kind of like not an easy experience either. Interestingly, like it was a difficult process emotionally, I think, really, because everything just went really well. Like it lined up exactly with what they needed, um, and all the deal that we did was great. I remember being on a phone call with their corp dev team, and I was kind of saying, like, we were having interesting discussions about how to approach the negotiations. And my position was, which I think the others were a little bit not sure about this. Like, but my position was, we walk away. Like, let's assume we're walking away from this because that puts us in the best negotiating position. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We might as well push it, and that means you have to be prepared to walk away. It has to be okay that it's a no. And so we had this. I remember just having this call where they made us an offer. They gave us this number, which is also, even that in itself was just the weirdest thing to happen. And I just said like something like, "Oh, we're a bit far away here." And we had raised a little bit of angel funding, so we did have a valuation at this point. So This is what we said. It was like, yeah, we feel like we've got a valuation. We've got a big future. Like, we've sort of made our case. And on the call, they almost doubled the offer.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was like that's probably my most lucrative 30 minutes I've ever spent in my life.
That takes guts to be willing to walk away when you've got this huge check looming in front of you.
Exactly, but that's it. That's the thing about negotiation is you have to be prepared to walk away if you're desperate for it or whatever, puts you in a different position. But they were very, I mean, value wise, I think they've gone way beyond. Like, it was a really good deal.
It was a good, good acquisition for them.
Yeah.
That's always good to hear nice. After the fact, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was a stressful time.
Think, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think that advice, by the way, that negotiation advice, like, obviously applies to like acquisitions and things, but I mean, in reality, most of us aren't going to have to deal with acquisition offers, unfortunately. But I think it also can be very easily applied to even just job offers, right? If you're desperate for the job, a lot of times it can come off, in my experience, is seeming like a worse deal for the employer. Whereas if you're like, oh, I could take this job or I could leave it, makes you seem a lot more enticing, right? As a person to hire. It's like, oh, they've got other people that are looking at them. There's some social pressure there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's amazing to me how much of life is just really about people. In fact, it's all just about people and relationships. Like, even in tech, in fact, especially in tech, maybe, we have, we feel like we're writing code for these machines, but we're not. We're writing code for people. And the products we're building are for people, ultimately, even if they are APIs or developer tools and things. Of course, developers are the people that are implementing it. And at some point, there are people on the other end, hopefully using the stuff you're building. So that investment in people and like I think like being kind, giving people time, like being interested in people, like all these things which I have that quite naturally because I am quite interested in, what just different people. Like I think,
Yeah.
people have all sorts of different experiences that leads them to kind of everyone's completely unique, and there's always something to learn from people. Um, and so like I think that's also been a nice ingredient in the whole thing. Um, and that's something I do say to people: it's worth investing in the people, and this is why you can't really like be a prick online to people.
Yeah.
It just you run out of you can't do it for long.
And the people who succeed that are pricks online, I would argue, do it in spite of being pricks, not
Right.
because they have been.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's certainly some examples you can point to, but
It's true.
they they probably would have done even better if they were also personable and everybody liked them.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's interesting. I think also like I'm quite forgiving as well of people if like because I've done this before in the past. I like to make jokes, and sometimes I'll make a joke at somebody's expense, and it hurts their feelings, and that is the worst thing in the world. And so that's why I try and be quite forgiving, And obviously, I'm sort of like in a position of privilege, so it's much easier for me. So I'm not saying that everyone should just forgive everything or whatever, but I think, yeah, like let people. Sometimes people are in a bad mood, or sometimes they're having a bad day, and so like there needs to be some scope for that as well. I think that's also,
yeah,
yeah,
and that's a really good point to make. I mean, it's just like another level of the whole soft skills talk. Like you have to almost uh, couch your judgment of someone within whatever context, and the reality is like you just don't even have the context.
yeah,
So like, good luck with that.
yeah.
Uh,
That's true. Can I ask you a
cool.
question?
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
I noticed you have a drum kit behind you. What's your favorite
Yeah.
beat?
My favorite beat,
Yeah,
like genre of beat.
no, like actual, like bass drum. Like do it like, like, like that. Just the classic. Do you like boom,
um,
boom, like go for it? What do you reckon?
have you? Well, it would actually probably just be like the classic jazz swing beat, like
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
that's kind of you
That's
walk down the
probably
street
it.
flipping a coin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We want my wife and I want to go to New Orleans so bad and just like hang out in a jazz bar. We haven't done it yet, but we have two kids under the age of 3. But at some point
yes,
we will make our way to New
that
Orleans and hang
sounds
out in a
amazing.
jazz bar.
I do want to go
Yeah.
there too. I've heard it's phenomenal as a
Yeah,
destination.
I imagine it can't be beat if you're into jazz music. I mean, I'm not huge into music anymore. I don't have as much time as I would like to play. Like starting a startup, having 2 kids under 3, it's like kind of. But I played a lot in high school. It was a good time back then.
Yeah, nice. Are you from Utah then?
Yeah, I grew up in southern Utah, and
Mm.
now I live just kind of south of Salt Lake.
Right. Beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, we just had Go West Conf here last year.
Mm.
It was pretty good. Bill Kennedy flew out. I think they're gonna keep doing it every year. I hope they do.
Yeah. It's run by Mariah Peterson, I think, organizes Go West Conf. I do want to go to that one time. I'm looking for an invite for next year, so I want to come out and do that.
Yeah, she's great. It was hosted at Weave last year. I kind of imagine they'll do it the same place this year, but I don't know. So we'll see.
Nice.
Very cool. Okay, so Machine Box, you sold that. Great successful exit. Your next company was Pace. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And tell us just a little bit about Pace.
So yeah, David and I again. This was we left Veritone and started to work on like project management-y. Like we had the idea. What we don't like is when people have a successful exit, which a lot of that is about luck. Like a lot of it is luck, basically. And what we didn't want to do is write a book. Like we had things to say about how you should do it and how to approach it and give yourself the best chance or create as many opportunities for luck as you can. So we had something to say about it, but what we didn't want to do is do a book like how to build a startup and sell it. it's a bit like doing a how to win the lottery book, given how
Yeah.
chance based everything really is. Um, Instead, we thought we'd build a tool that would help teams kind of build in the right way, what we thought was the right way to build software. And this was the idea behind Pace. And really, we were like, it was like a hobby project, honestly. And so we built it with Svelte JS as the front end, Go as the back end. Fire Search also came out of that as a project because it was in Google Cloud Platform. We used Firebase as the back end, and Fire Search is like a full text search engine built on top of Firebase, and it's actually free. So it's free to use completely now. It's not open source only because I think it's kind of locked. It's just sort of frozen. No one would be working on it, but it's free and it runs in production and it's great. So like completely
Very cool. Yeah.
try if they want, if you're using Firebase. It's just a Docker container. You just use Cloud Run, I think, and wire it up, and it's dead easy. Wow. And then so a few years before, I was in an airport and I was on my way to Lviv, actually in Ukraine, for a Google event, and the people, there was just people behind me in the queue. Our flight had been delayed, and the people behind me in the line were talking tech, and I was like not really in the mood to engage at this point. But they started talking about Go, and then they started like saying something that I didn't agree with in Go, and I thought, right, got no choice now. I've got to get involved with this. So I spun around.
Go's error handling is terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
You had to get involved. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Call security. Now I've just planted drugs on them out of spite.
That's the best way to handle those sorts of situations.
It's the only way.
In my experience.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. No, so I turned around and started chatting, and one of those people was Tom Wilkie, who this was before his startup had been acquired by Grafana Labs, Causal. But we just hit it off, and then like we were hanging out throughout the conference. Like we'd just keep meeting up, and we'd have some beers, and we'd like hang out, and we'd go and see talks and stuff, and we just sort of like became friends, just like conference buddies. And he lives in London too, so occasionally, back in London, we'd meet up again, and sort of like again. I mean, this was an airport, so I don't recommend meeting people in airports. But it was on the way to a tech conference. So again, highlights the importance of that in-person thing. And then as we were then years later, we're building Pace, and I pitched him this idea, which was essentially like Pace. Pace was a project management tool, had like messaging, and it was like Slack and email and like lots of different things, and GitHub. It's like lots of different things that would like integrate in different places and things. And it's really a collaboration tool. But I pitched him this idea of basically that for Grafana Labs, if there's like something goes wrong, if there's like an incident, this would be like a war room or a bunker or a place for everyone to get together to collaborate, and you'd have various AI might be helping you out, and kind of like pitched him this incident management tool is what it essentially was. Yeah, and he loved the idea, and then that was the acquisition into Grafana Labs. And then now there is Grafana IRM, which a lot of people don't know. Grafana, they think of the graphs, but Grafana Cloud is phenomenal, and the databases that the teams build are phenomenal. And then we build this. Pace became this incident response management tool that helps teams. When something's gone wrong, they creates the spaces they need to collaborate. It watches the Slack channels or wherever you're chatting. MS Teams, it watches them and looks for clues for how to help you diagnose incidents. And so it's like really exciting project, and it's nice because we get to innovate, we get to do things that no one else has done. There are some other companies that are doing this kind of thing as well. Incident.io is an example of one that I think is really great. They're doing great stuff too. And yeah, it's like, I think again, just comes back to meeting somebody in a tech conference and opportunities then can come from that.
That's amazing. And okay, so you built this tool. It's outside of Grafana. Grafana acquired it, and then you went on to work at Grafana. I'm assuming on the team that's integrating this product.
Yeah.
Grafana is so cool. I've used it. I mean, for basically all my monitoring
Mm.
that I've ever done. Like it's been around long enough that I've used it in most of my companies
Yeah.
that I've worked at. So I mean, that's just really cool. And anyone who's listening that's interested in all in telemetry and stuff like that, graphs monitoring, definitely check out Grafana. It's got, I mean, my understanding is, I mean, we use the open source version. There's also a hosted version, a cloud.
Yeah, all their main
take
database
care of.
technologies are completely open source. So you can just pick it up and run it yourself. What happens is at some point you hit a scale where you don't want to be maintaining it, and then that's when Grafana Cloud comes in and you can just start running it there, and we basically look after it for you. And it's such a great, it's the best company I've ever worked at, honestly. The culture it has is kind of great. Most of the management are just ex-engineers, so is a sort of instinctive understanding of how to build software, and that turns into lots of policies and things which make sense. So it tends to be. I mean, it's a great place to work, and yeah, kudos to everyone. It's just like, we occasionally have we all get together as a company, done it a couple of times, and you get to meet everyone in real life. And actually, there's like over 1,000 people now, 1,200 or 300 now. It's really grown. But just meeting all the people that you work with occasionally, and it's I don't know. Everyone you encounter is like, you think you could be friends with these people. Like somehow, whether it's the hiring, they've done hiring well, or I don't know, like somehow you meet someone at Grafana, you're gonna get on with them. That's my experience.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think software people should be starting software companies. I think it leads to a really great culture. And if you ever have the choice between working for someone who has at least some sort of technical background or not, I'd always advise, especially if you're newer in your career, work for someone who has a technical background. It's so great to be able to go to your boss and be like, this is the problem, and they actually get it, instead of just like, oh, why can't we just add a button, right?
Right. It's also the trust. Like there's no suspicion of like, oh, this shouldn't be taking this long, but those misunderstandings, I've had them all my career. I remember one time in my first job, we built this website for a golf company, like a golf course, and it was a scheduler. And I'd spent so much time trying to get the actual scheduling to work, where you could like put in your availability and other people could put theirs in. You could match you with other randoms, so you could play with at certain times and things. And I remember doing the demo to the guy, and the only thing, he loved it because it had a calendar UI component that we didn't even build. He's like, I can't believe you can just see the dates and click on it. And that was the thing that really impressed him, because he didn't have any idea. But it's always like, so massive advantage if you're working with people that really understand tech.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Okay, there's two more last things I want to get to. I know we're going a little over the time that I scheduled. I apologize for that.
That's my fault, probably.
But no, it's okay. But we'll be quick, and I'll get it wrapped up for us. First, I have a couple just like hot take style questions I want to ask.
Right.
And we can kind of blaze through them really quick. The first is, what's your favorite part of the Go programming language? If you had to just pick one thing to go into your new, like there's a new language coming out and it needs to have this one thing, what's the one thing?
Well, it has to be the minimalism in it, if that's what you mean. Like, the fact that it doesn't have loads of features, means they've been very selective and thoughtful about what gets in, but it means it's easier to read, it's easier to learn, it's easier to maintain. It pays dividends in orders of magnitude. So yeah, clear winner for me is it's minimalism.
That's amazing.
What about you?
I that would definitely make my top 3. I think for me, it might be at the moment the formatter,
Yeah, that's
just
good.
because recently I've been dealing with Prettier and ESLint, and it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
So
The thing is, you can't configure the Go thumped stuff, so it's the same for everyone.
that's the key.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. That's the key.
Yeah.
I was just in a tweet discussion with someone about this. I was asking, is
discussion.
there a black X discussion? Thank you.
Sure.
Is there a black formatter or a Go thumped for SQL that anyone knows of? And they were like, what do you mean? I was like, well, like that it just has a set of rules and it's not configurable. And they're like, well, but wouldn't it be better if it was configurable? And I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
And I wasn't able to find
That's it. The default accepted wisdom is more configuration equals better, and more features equals better. And both of those things are not true. The thing about Machinebox was what we chose not to do was we kept the scope tiny. And honestly, if you want to be a 10x developer, if you even believe in that kind of thing, that's the way to do it. Do a tenth of the things and just do them really well.
That's amazing advice. Yeah.
Minimalism again.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, next hot take question.
Hot take.
What's your least favorite part of Go? What would you remove?
Yeah.
Or change?
I did a talk kind of on this subject in 2018 at the Gotham Go conference in New York, which, by the way, you have to go to at some point. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's like a comedy show and a tech conference rolled into one. Mark Bates, Steve Francia hosted it. I hosted it one year when Steve wasn't available, and just had the time of my life. But you can get a sense of the tone of it from the talk if you Google things in Go I never use, Gotham Go. And so, yeah, talk about that exact thing. Additional to the stuff I mentioned in that talk, I would say I'd get rid of the optional second parameter from some things when you like type assertions and stuff. I'd just make them not optional. Again, it's about go for simplicity and make it always look the same as much as possible. I'd probably get rid of that. And I'd also might get rid of global state completely. I think I'd never use it, so you can definitely get by without it. I know why they did it. I can see, if you think about scripting languages and the sort of ease of use of that, but it's just bad to use it, I think. So I'd probably get rid of that.
That second one really hits home for me. Yeah, there seems to be a tendency a lot of times. It really gets me when it's like in a package that you're importing. That one's tricky.
Yeah,
but
well, honestly, it always comes back. Everything's easier without global state. So, by the way, for anyone that doesn't know, this is like when you have variables and things just in the package outside of functions. So it's harder to test. You're suddenly messing around, like you can't run tests in parallel, really. And sometimes you'll literally get data races and stuff. So you could have like concurrency issues. Everything's harder with it. So just avoid it. You don't need it. Have a main, call into a run function, pass some arguments in, and take it from there. You don't need, pass things around. It's explicit and it's not magic. And that's, I think, my advice.
That's better. Yeah.
That's better.
I'm with you on that one. Yeah. Okay, last one. What's your most unpopular opinion?
Yeah, so on Go Time, we have this regular segment, Unpopular Opinion. And there's been some great ones. And we poll them on Twitter to find out if they are actually unpopular or not. And so I looked through that to see which one of mine. I've done a few over the years. And probably the one is, and this could just be for me, but it's that debugging with a debugger is much slower than just printing out values and thinking. Like, I find
this must be a Go developer thing, because it's definitely not unpopular with me. But like, I know, for example, if we also invited John Carmack up here, that he'd have a few things to say about that.
I'm sure. And honestly, it probably depends. Most of the unpopular opinions, it really, if we're honest, it's like, it depends. That's what the segment should probably be called. But it's I don't know. I used to do it a lot in C#, but when you're especially writing concurrent code and things like this, like I find just closing my eyes and just thinking and imagining it, then the answers come much faster than they seem to when I'm debugging it. Sometimes I want to know what the values are at various points, and then I print those out. But yeah, I just do log print ln or log print f all the time.
I use debuggers a lot when I was new to programming, and like these days it tends to be information overload for me. Like I usually just need like one or two critical pieces of information to debug something, and usually, and again, because Go compiles quickly and I can get to the part of the code that I care about within a second, like adding a print statement is the fastest way. I have heard the argument that debuggers tend to be much more useful if like your application is super stateful. Like you can imagine a video game where you have to get to a very specific state in the application to like start,
right,
and then you want to start inspecting.
Yeah.
But like that never happens in like back-end web development. It's like you just connect to your IO dependencies and you like run the thing. And then you see it.
Yeah, it could be a property of the design also, and opting for all this simplicity and the way that I do test-driven development. So I always am running like I'm thinking of things in small pieces, units and stuff. But I imagine there are cases where you just can't do it, and a debugger is what you need. But yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Matt. This has just been absolutely fantastic to get to meet you.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Great luck. Best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you. Can you quickly plug your stuff? Like tell people about your podcast and your book and where they can find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter mainly, Mat Ryer, Matryer. I'm on YouTube. I do a monthly comedy show with British comedian Mark Watson, which is a choose your own adventure kind of comedy story on Twitter, where you use Twitter polls to choose the branch of the story. So that's a lot of fun. We're taking that to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival next month in August. So we're going to be doing the live show of it there, which is also kind of phenomenal. Go Programming Blueprints 2nd edition book still available. Help yourself. Don't help yourself. You have to pay for it. There's that. I don't know. Write tests.
Yeah. Go Time FM.
Go Time
right?
FM. Yeah,
as well.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also doing Grafana's Big Tent podcast as well. And that one is actually, now I should say, an award-winning podcast. Probably nothing to do with me, but it won an award. So yeah, that's it. And that's about observability, the community and the tech around or observability stuff. So that's Grafana's Big Tent. Season 1's done, and we're working on season 2 now. So I think that's all the things.
That's fantastic. I'll drop all of those links in the description, the show notes. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you very much.